Hey everyone, a very good morning. Thank you all for taking time to join us in this webinar. It's going to be actually one that's very interesting because it's something that everyone needs. We're going to be talking about how to create a perfect profile, career profile with JobStreet, which also serves as your resume. So there's going to be a few great points today. So before we start, just a few house checking, just to make sure that firstly you make sure you do have a career profile with JobStreet, because we are going to talk about what kind of words you should use in your profile, how should you be updating it, and how is it going to attract hirers to look at your profile. So that's going to be really interesting. And secondly, remember, if you already have a profile, we are going to also encourage you how to update it, just so that you're going to stand out from the rest of the profiles. And lastly, make sure you remember what questions you want to ask, put it in the Q&A box, or just start throwing out questions with other participants in this call, even in the chat box. So let's keep this interactive, and it's going to be a fun session. And we're going to be back with you shortly. So just make sure that, check on your career profiles and make sure that you're familiar with what's going on in your profile. This is really so that, when our speaker later come and introduce and tell you what to do, you would know roughly where to go in your profile and how to maneuver it around. All right. So yeah, let us know, if you have any questions or whatnot in the Q&A chat box, and we'll get back to you really shortly. Hey everyone, a very good morning again to those of you who've just joined. Now I'm just looking at the chat box. I'm liking the energy here. Everyone is up, and I see this question: is the video disabled? Yes, video is disabled. Only panelists will be able to show video. So don't worry about that. We'll be able to, get all out with you in the chat box. So while we're waiting for everyone, I'm just curious, how many of you are actually at work and just tuning in to this webinar in your ears? And how many of you are actually at home, you just graduated and you actually woke up early to join this webinar? Come on, let me know in the chat box what is going on with you guys right now. I woke up early for this, excited. Oh yes, Amirul, work from home. Yes, that's great. Yes, we're keeping everyone safe, working from home and only going out when it's necessary. That's good, working from home. Now, how many of you actually prefer working from home versus going back to your office? But I personally like to work from home. It's a lot more flexibility. We see a fresh grad looking for a job. Someone as well looking for a new opportunity. That is great. I see Diego from Chile, just moved to Singapore. Oh, that's interesting. We've got someone from Singapore here. Welcome, welcome. I think most of us would be Malaysians here, but if you're not, do let us know. Shout out, which country are you from? Where are you currently working? Just get to know each other. It's gonna be fun. Wow, we've got another more from Singapore. That is great. All right, we are going to start in a minute. Okay. All right, I am going to start right now. I'm going to be introducing our speaker. Today, we are really in for a good treat because we've got a representative from ResumeWriter.MY. She's going to take us through how can you create a beautiful career profile where, employers are going to pick it up right on when they pick on the right tips. I've seen the notes, and honestly, I've learned something as well. So before we get to it, I just realized I've forgotten to introduce myself. My name is Angelica. I'm from JobStreet and I handle the candidate marketing portion. And we are here together with our Resume Writer to really help you, all of you candidates out there, trying to find a job, trying to perfect your resume. It's something that we have to improve all along the way. It's not one that can go forever. We got to keep improving, right? So here we are today, learning the tips and tricks on our resume. Right. Now, who is Karen? Karen is a resume consultant with Resume Writer Asia. She's also a sales operation program manager at Microsoft, and also she's a career blogger. Now, she provides personal career support to young professionals around the world and engages with C-suite executives from Fortune 100 companies. And these are Microsoft, Cisco, Oracle, so on and so forth. Now, she enjoys inspiring others, and her personal philosophy is mastering my mindset to grow 1% every day. Now she's have a lot of that 1% every day now. She's going to have a lot of percentage to share with us today. So, have your notebooks ready, listen to her and, just take it away, Karen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Angelica. And good morning, everybody. I'm going to share my screen shortly here. So hopefully you can see it. I'm just going to double check. Angelica, are you all good?
All good.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody, and hope you are all doing well. I'm Karen Ngo, a resume consultant, and I'm really excited to connect with you all today and chat about career profiles. Thank you so much for tuning into this webinar brought to you by JobStreet and Resume Writer, where we will break down how you can best present yourself and your skill sets, and whether you're applying for full-time roles or internships. Before we dive into things, let me do a quick introduction of myself and my background. I'm currently a career consultant with over 4 years of experience in resume writing. And over that time, I've helped more than 100 students and young professionals around the world strengthen their career narratives, add more value to their resumes, and successfully land new roles. I currently work at Microsoft and also with Resume Writer Malaysia, which is part of the Resume Writer Asia Group. We're Asia's leading resume writing firm that was established in 2009, and we have a team of over 50 HR experts, former recruiters, and resume specialists. On the side, I'm also a passionate blogger and foodie, especially when it comes to bubble tea and sushi. Now, let's go into the agenda and what we'll be talking about for the next little bits. First, we'll quickly talk about why we are here today and what you can get out of this webinar. Second, I'll dive into the myths behind crafting the perfect career profile, as well as the do's and don'ts and our top tips and recommendations. Third, I'll show you how Resume Writer can help you succeed in your job search. And finally, we'll open up the floor for Q&A over the last 15 minutes or so. As Angelica mentioned, I would encourage all of you to take notes, ask questions, and participate by chatting with us below in this webinar. And that is how you will get the most out of our time together. So to start, let's kick things off quickly with an activity, because I'm curious about why you are here today. I've got some ideas, and it's probably to get some tips for landing your next job. But I really hope that you can be a little bit more specific and share your feedback with us, because it'll help both us and the JobStreet team create more tailored and relevant content for you in the future, whether that's through more webinars like this or other resources. So Angelica, can you please share our first poll for everybody to answer? Perfect. We'll give about 30 seconds here for everyone to take some time to answer the poll. We've got some different options there, which is great. And I assume when the poll is done, it'll pop back up to me. So Angelica, please let me know when I can start speaking again.
Anytime you're ready.
All right, perfect.
Yep.
So back to me over here. So thank you everyone for taking the time to fill that out. Our team will make sure to go through each and every one and use your feedback to create even more great resources going forward. Now, as for why I'm here, it's really thanks to our JobStreet team, who wanted everyone with a career profile to have the best chance of landing a great new role. So we decided to collaborate and share some of our expertise and guidance with you as Asia's leading resume writing firm. And with our team of resume consultants who are all experts in the field, we know how to craft that perfect career profile that you need. On top of that, we've helped hundreds of clients just like you land great roles at Fortune 500 companies like Google, HSBC, and P&G, to name a few. And on top of that, we've got years and years of experience and expert advice that we can share with you. Now, let's talk about the perfect career profile and start with some myths and whether they are true or not. I'm going to do another quick activity with you all, presenting you with 5 statements, and we will see if you can separate the facts from fiction. So let's see how you can do. Angelica, can you please kick off our second Mythbusters poll? There will be a series of 5 different questions, and I would like you to guess whether this is true or false. Let's start with the first one, which is, you must always sound smart. The second one is, you don't need to worry about the small details because they don't really matter. So please put in your answer whether that's true or false. The third one is, it's okay to exaggerate your experience to make your profile more impressive. The fourth one is, having a broad one-size-fits-all profile gives you the best chance of success. And lastly, we've got, to land an interview, you need a high GPA. So if you haven't already, please go in and answer true or false for each of these 5 statements, and then we will go into them in just a few seconds. All right, I'm just going to do a quick pull check here. Angelica, have we gotten some responses in and are we good to go?
Yes, we are good to go.
Perfect. Thank you, Angelica. And thank you,
problem.
everybody, for your participation. Let's now confirm whether you were right or wrong. So our first Mythbuster is that you do not need to try and sound smart. A lot of the time, people tend to make the mistake of adding lots of fancy and complicated words to their career profiles. And they do this because they want to make it seem like they accomplished a lot and had a very important role. However, the most important thing you need to do when preparing your career profile is to make it simple and easy to understand. Don't try to sound smart or fancy, because this is not an English essay on Shakespeare. Your career profile should be a quick, concise overview of your experiences and skills. And we don't want to overcomplicate things for recruiters or hiring managers who are reading it. So for example, rather than saying focused on and deployed exemplary customer service, you can simply say provided high quality customer service, because it means the same thing and it is much easier for a reader to digest. By keeping your career profile clean and simple, you'll show that you're a clear and concise communicator, which is key. So now moving on to our next Mythbuster, it's that you really do need to worry about the small details when they matter, because they do matter. How ironic would it be if you claimed that you have a keen attention to detail, but then you have typos and incorrect grammar on your profile? Honestly, this shows inconsistency and carelessness. So make sure you do pay attention to those details. And a couple of ways that I recommend doing this would be by going through your profile or resume and reading it out loud to make sure that the phrasing makes sense. On top of that, you could also use other tools like spell check and Grammarly, which are free. Our third mythbuster is that it is not okay to embellish or overstate your experiences. You absolutely should not inflate your results or use any white lies in your career profile, because when you eventually make it to that job offer stage, your employer will do a background check on your career history. So let's say that you're with your previous employer for 9 months, but then you adjusted the dates on your profile to show that you were with them for over a year. Another example would be that you claimed that you managed a team of 10, when in reality, you only managed a team of 2. How do you think a hiring manager would react if they found out? Obviously, they would disqualify you right away, and they will find out eventually. So when you lie and are caught, it reflects very poorly on you as a professional. So remember that honesty is the best and only policy. Our fourth mythbuster is that you should create a targeted profile instead of having a more generic profile. This is frankly because generic profiles do not stand out. If you are applying for a marketing role, then your profile should scream marketing. It should include the keywords, the experiences, and skill sets that position you as a marketing expert. If you're interested in applying for a business analyst role, on the other hand, then you need a completely different profile that emphasizes your analytical and reporting skills and ability to think critically and solve problems. Targeted profiles give you the greatest chance of success because you show that you're perfect for that role. If, on the other hand, you have a one-size-fits-all profile, recruiters and hiring managers will be more likely to overlook you because you don't stand out as much compared to other, more focused candidates. Our final myth is that GPA is not everything, and it will not make or break your career. You do not need a 4.0 because academic performance does not necessarily translate into success in the workplace. For a start, hiring managers know that GPA can vary a lot depending on what courses you take. And second, even with a lower GPA, if you can show relevant experience, whether it's through your extracurricular activities, volunteering, or internships, that can actually be much more valuable to a hiring manager. So let me share an example with you and say that we have 2 different students applying for the same role. First up, we've got Sally. She's got a perfect GPA in all of her classes, but she only focuses on her grades and never joined any student clubs or did any volunteering. Next up, we've got Julie. Her grades are not as good as Sally's, but she's the VP of the Business Technology Club, and she's attending networking events and workshops every month. Julie's already met with many industry professionals who've given her a lot of advice, and a couple of them have even offered to give her referrals to their companies because of how impressed they were by her experiences and presentation skills. From a hiring manager's perspective, yes, Sally could be a good hire because she has the smarts for the job. However, Julie could also be a great hire, if not better, because she's shown that she's a good team player, an excellent communicator, and she already has the beginnings of a professional network, which could be highly useful. So as you can hopefully see, a perfect GPA is not all important, and relevant experiences often matter much more. Now, let's move on to the 5 common mistakes that people usually make on their career profiles or resumes. Can you all guess what they are? Mistake number 1 is repeating the same types of experiences for different roles. For example, if you've had several different roles, internships, and experiences, you will need to highlight the different activities for each of those roles. For a hiring manager, it doesn't convey any value to read that you've done the exact same monthly reporting for 3 different roles. However, if you highlight your reporting and analytics experience in one role and then project management skills in another, then it actually shows that you keep adding value. Similar to what I just mentioned about adding value outside of your GPA, you want to demonstrate that you're well-rounded and always growing your skill sets and capabilities because you can adapt to different roles and responsibilities. This is really important, especially earlier in your career, because it'll open you up to a lot more opportunities. Mistake number 2 is lying about your experience and employment gaps. We talked about this earlier when discussing our Mythbusters, but I really want to emphasize this point because it's a mistake that we see all the time and it's really damaging to your career profile and professional reputation. So let me say it once again. You should not over-embellish or overstate your experiences, and you should stay true to what you've done. This means that even if you have employment gaps, don't try to cover them up by adjusting dates, because these kinds of lies can be caught out really easily and will eliminate you from the process. Plus, they're completely unnecessary. Employment gaps, for example, you can usually explain and frame positively in your cover letter or during a screening call or interview. So please remember, honesty is the best and only policy. Mistake number 3 is not providing enough details or metrics to support your skills and experiences. This is because while you don't want to overcomplicate and over-embellish your profile, you still need to provide sufficient details to demonstrate what you've accomplished and how you added value in your role. More importantly, make sure you quantify those experiences because metrics give your profile a lot more scale and context, which add a lot of value. Let me give you 2 examples. The first one is oversaw research surveys, managing teams and budgets. Not too bad. The second example is oversaw research surveys across over 1,000 participants, managing a team of 12 and a budget of over $20,000 per quarter. It's pretty clear that the second example sounds much better, right? And this is the power of quantifying your experiences. So you kind of see what the difference is and how much better it'll make your bullet points sound. Mistake number 4 is diluting your profile with irrelevant details and weak phrasing. A fine line with mistake number 3, which is not providing enough detail, is that you also want to make sure that the details you do include are relevant. Remember, the main message you want to get across is why you are the best candidate for a role and not anyone else. If that role is 100% data analytics focused, the hiring manager will not care if you helped plan an office Christmas party because it is just not relevant. So including that in your profile just makes it less focused. Also, remember to make that your phrasing strong and impactful. For example, don't lead with statements like responsible for or worked on, which are very weak and dull. Instead, you want to use power verbs like coordinated, managed, which are much more engaging and compelling for a hiring manager to read. And lastly, we have mistake number 5, which is excluding an executive summary from your profile. On average, recruiters and hiring managers will initially look at your profile for just 7 seconds. And this is because they look through so many profiles every day, they simply don't have the time to read through each one in depth. Instead, they'll quickly skim through your profile and decide whether to read it in more detail. So that is why having an executive summary is super important, because it allows them to see your top 3 to 5 accomplishments and most impressive highlights as quickly and easily as possible, which also allows you to establish that narrative for yourself. If you're working in your JobStreet profile, you can use the other information fields under the additional information section to add in your executive summary. All right, now that we've covered the Mythbusters and common mistakes, let's take a look at a couple of profiles and identify some of the mistakes that we just talked about. Hopefully, you all took great notes and are ready to do this. So let's get started with profile number 1. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to read through this and find 3 mistakes, and then we will put them in the chat. So please do that as you are looking at it. I would suggest that you do a quick skim through everything first to get a feel of the profile in the first 30 seconds, and then do a deeper dive to find the 3 mistakes in the next minute. And as you find these mistakes, please share them in our comments as we want to keep this interactive and fun. And I'll come back in 2 minutes. So I'll mute myself. Awesome. It looks like your responses are starting to come in. So great job, everybody. Keep those coming. We've got about a minute left. Really good. We're seeing some about long sentences, weak phrasing, typos, long sentences, tangible results. Really good. Nice call outs, everybody. No metrics, too lengthy description. Really nice. Looks like you're all catching on. And we'll just give it another 10 or so seconds here before we dive into the mistakes. All right. Thank you so much to everybody who has taken the time to go through this and share their comments. So it looks like you've caught many of them. So let's go into them now. So the first mistake is no power verb openings, similar to what you said about weak phrasing. If you read each bullet point, none of these start with a strong action verb. And for example, instead of worked on for the first bullet point, this person could have started with created a learning organizational framework, which is much more impactful and concise. Instead of was tasked with in the third bullet point, this person could have started with developed new organizational structure too, which again sounds a lot better. So you all got that one for no power verb openings and weak phrasing. The second mistake is this person is not concise at all. Their bullet points are way too long and contain a bunch of irrelevant details that don't mean anything to an employer, especially if we look at the last bullet points where they were assigned to help plan a Christmas party. Firstly, this doesn't show that they took any initiative to help plan. They actually had to be voluntold. And secondly, unless they're looking for an events planning role, this is a complete waste of space. So you also got that where they're not being concise and they have too long paragraphs. The third mistake is that this person didn't quantify any of their results or experiences. As a recruiter or hiring manager, I have no idea how big or small this person's role was. And I also don't know if the impacts they made in their role were significant. For example, how many stakeholders did they impact? Did they improve any programs as a sales and marketing executive, and by how much? Looking at this profile right now, I have no idea. So remember that metrics are very important in giving your experiences substance and showcasing your value add. Now here's an example of what a good version of profile 1 could have looked like. So as you can see with this one, each point starts with a strong action verb, providing impact like oversaw, spearheaded, and developed. Each point is also concise, easy to read, and avoids fluff and irrelevant details. Remember that the original profile had 4 to 5 lines for each bullet point, but here we've trimmed that down to only 2 or 3 lines. And lastly, every bullet point has a metric, which helps provide that scale and context that we just talked about. So hopefully this has warmed you up for our second profile, which is an executive summary. Again, I'm going to give you another couple minutes to identify 4 mistakes that this person is making. And as soon as you find them, please share them in the comments. So I will mute myself for a bit and give you some time to read through this and put in your comments. All right, let me read a few that we've got so far. We've got typos, no metrics, the penmanship, spelling mistakes, fluff words, no power verbs, repetitive, weak choice of words. These are all really good. Thank you everyone for sharing them. We'll give it another minute for everyone to get their comments in and chat below. I really liked Jessica's comments there about how this was very general. And again, it really does depend on the type of job that this person is applying for to make it seem whether it is relevant or not. So good call out there, Jessica. Not enough metrics, bombastic words, repeated phrases, overstated achievements, no significant achievements, really good. All right, we'll give it another 10 seconds. Awesome. Thank you again for sharing your comments below. It looks like you caught a lot of different errors. For the purpose of this example, I'm only going to cover the top 4, but you've all called out really good ones. So give yourself a pat on the back. Let's go into the first one, which is that this person keeps repeatedly focusing on their languages and ability to speak English, Malay, and Thai. A few of you have already called this out, so good job. Basically, the first time that they mention this, it's useful and interesting. But after that, it's just repetition, which isn't needed and just wastes space. The second mistake is that they've used redundant and overcomplicated words to try and look smart. So some examples of this would be evolved, tremendous, dreamscaping, and next generation, which actually don't add any value, as you know. Again, remember that this is not an English story writing class. This kind of language just makes the profile harder to read and digest. The third mistake is the level of detail under their significant achievements section. The second bullet point here lacks detail. So although it sounds interesting, there is not enough information for me as a hiring manager to know why this is important. For example, the third bullet point is just irrelevant. As a recruiter or hiring manager, I really wouldn't care about their penmanship. So including it simply wastes space and dilutes the overall impact of the executive summary. Now, similar to before, here's an ideal version of Profile 2 where we've fixed those 4 mistakes. So the first thing is that this person's multilingual abilities and international experience are still mentioned, but just once, which keeps that impact high. Secondly, the language isn't complicated. So hiring managers and recruiters will find it much easier to read than the first one that we saw. Third, the second bullet point has been expanded, showing how their network was acquired and how it could be useful. And we also removed that third achievement point on penmanship because it is irrelevant. And lastly, on top of this, we've also added in lots of metrics to show scale and context. So as you can see, this profile looks a lot stronger, and I would be more comfortable hiring this candidate because I've seen what they can accomplish. All right, so hopefully that exercise helped you get into the mindset of reviewing your own profiles with a keener eye so that you can avoid making those same mistakes. Let's now move on to the next section of our agenda, which is 5 best practices for crafting a perfect career profile. Best practice number 1 is to remember to include an executive summary that highlights your best achievements. This will help recruiters and hiring managers see your expertise and achievements quickly and easily. And we just went through an example when I showed you profile number 2, so you can use that as a reference. Best practice number 2 is to be concise and consistent. Remember to start each bullet point with a strong action verb, like led, managed, coordinated, because these are more high impacts. And also keep your bullet points concise and to the point. You only need 3 to 5 bullet points per position, and each one should only be about 2 sentences. Best practice number 3, quantify your results and highlight your outcomes. This will provide scale and context to your skills and experiences, which will make it easier for a hiring manager to visualize you as a candidate. You'll also show that you don't just do your job, you're excellent at it, which will make you stand out. However, there is one thing to note, which is to keep in mind of your company's confidentiality clause and not disclose anything that may be for internal use only. If you can't include an exact figure because it would be sensitive information, you can try using a percentage, which is also high value. So let me give you an example. Rather than disclosing what your actual sales target was and how much you beat it by, you could simply say that you exceeded your sales target by 30%. Best practice number 4, use those relevant keywords. Earlier, we mentioned the importance of tailoring your profile to a specific role, field, or industry. And you can do this by including relevant phrasing and industry terms, which is particularly important because many companies use ATS scanners. For those of you who don't know, ATS is an applicant tracking system, and a lot of hiring managers will use them to help filter, search, and shortlist their candidates. One way they'll do this is by having the ATS search for relevant keywords. So if your profile doesn't feature these relevant keywords, then your chances of making it into their shortlist are much lower. And finally, our best practice is to differentiate yourself because it is a very competitive landscape out there and you need to do everything you can to stand out from the crowd. Even if you don't have much practical work experience, again, remember that you can add an extracurricular experience that is relevant. For example, if you're applying for an investment banking position, you could show your participation in any trading competitions or student investment groups to show that you at least have something related to what you're applying for. You also want to demonstrate how your skills and experiences match the company's mission and values. For example, at Microsoft, having a growth mindset is very important. So I tried to demonstrate that by showcasing my studies abroad to Japan and Singapore, my volunteering and extracurricular activities, as well as how I was learning beginner Python and blockchain, despite not coming from a technical background. So these are all little things that you can add to make your profile stand out among other people. So I know that was a lot for you to take in. So let's just do a quick recap of everything that we just went over, and then we can go into Q&A and answer some of your questions that you posted in the chat. So first, we had our Mythbusters at the very beginning, where we had you answer those 5 different questions or statements and whether they were true or false. So remember that number 1 is don't try to sound too smart and add in overly technical or fancy language. Number 2, pay attention to the small details and ensure that there are no typos or grammatical errors. Number 3, don't over-exaggerate or embellish your experiences, and instead, you should demonstrate high integrity. Number 4, create a targeted profile that shows why you are the best candidate for that specific role or industry. And number 5, a perfect GPA is not all important. You should also look for how else you can showcase your relevant skills and experiences. So after going into our Mythbusters, we got to cover our common mistakes and went through a couple of those example profiles. So the 5 common mistakes are, number 1, excluding an executive summary. Number 2, lying about your experiences, because remember, honesty is the best and only policy. Number 3, repeating the same types of experiences for different roles. Number 4, not providing enough details. And number 5, including irrelevant or the wrong types of details. So those are our 5 common mistakes, which hopefully you will remember and kind of cement it into your brain after doing that exercise. And lastly, I shared some best practices, which you should keep in mind to build on top of everything that we've covered today to help you craft that perfect career profile. Number 1, include an executive summary that shows your most impressive accomplishments. Number 2, be concise and consistent because hiring managers and recruiters don't have much time to read through everything. Number 3, quantify your results and outcomes because it is much more impactful. Number 4, use relevant keywords to increase your chances with an ATS scanner. And number 5, differentiate yourself to stand out among other candidates. You might have noticed that some of these tips were similar or have been mentioned multiple times, but that's because these points are super important and they're the most common mistakes that we see, but also the most high value when we can get them right. So hopefully you'll remember these going forward. And with that, I hope that you came out of this webinar with some tips that make you feel more confident in creating that great career profile. Again, our team here at Resume Writer has helped hundreds of clients craft perfect career profiles, and we've seen them to go on to land great roles with great companies. So we're excited to share our expert advice to help you land your next role. And I'm really confident that if you do follow the guidance that we've provided today, you'll see your success rate really improve. One other thing you can do, visit ResumeWriter.MY to check out our full range of resources and our blog, which will give you a lot more details and tips for success. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for joining me for this webinar today, and we'll open up the floor for some questions. So as you're typing them into the Q&A, myself and the JobStreet team can answer some of them for you.
Thank you, Karen. That was really amazing. I've learned something myself, and there are quite a lot of interesting questions, all right? So we'll start with the first one. I'm just going to pick up those that were sent out earlier first. So hang in there, but I have not mentioned your questions, all right? So the first question was, does the number of pages in your resume matter?
So that's a very good question, and it actually depends on the markets and the different countries that you are in. I know in North America, having a one-page resume is usually ideal and having like a short profile. However, I have heard that in Asia, it's a little bit different, and having a bit of a lengthier profile that has a lot of substance is fine, as long as you follow those guidance and tips that we've provided in being concise and providing a lot of impact in your lines. I will see if David or anyone else has any comments to add on top of that.
Well, I can share something.
For sure.
I think it was a couple of years ago where we went through similar workshop about resume, and I remember being told that try not to go more than 2 pages of a resume, because I mean, like you mentioned, right? HR managers see like a million resumes every day, so we want to be able to give them the important points quickly. So we were told that 2 to 3 pages is the maximum, but don't go beyond 3 pages. So I don't know, we can try as much as you can to keep it short and concise, like what Karen mentioned earlier. Just mention the important points and make sure it's communicated correctly and clearly, right? So that's exactly the first question. Now, secondly, it's also about pages of resume, but recommended for fresh grad. Now, this one, I'm not sure whether there's a difference or not.
Oh, sorry, can you please repeat that?
It's also still about number of pages for a resume, but for fresh grad.
Okay.
Yeah.
For fresh grad, since we have less experience, I would say 1 to 2 pages maximum. And that's because unless you are an established professional with over a decade of experience, then you can go to that 2 to 3 pages. But as a new grad, 1 to 2 is best because you want to showcase that you have a lot of potential and keep them interested.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, about executive summary, we have actually got quite a few questions about executive summary. So someone asked, do I need to mention my graduating course in my executive summary?
So it really depends. As a last resort, if you don't have a lot of other experiences that are relevant, that could be something that you mentioned, such as highlighted coursework that is relevant to the role that you're applying for. But I would really encourage you to go and seek that extracurricular experiences, any internships that you have, or volunteering, because those can actually provide a lot more value and make you stand out a lot more and prepare you for that role. Coming from personal experience as a new grad, I never mentioned much of my coursework unless it was something that was client facing. So for example, in my entrepreneurial class, I had to work with a client to help them with their AI startup. And because we got really good results and we doubled their client base by 100%, that was something that I mentioned in my resume.
All right, that's great. Now I'm just looking at this one Very interesting question. Hold on, let me just find it. All right. If you are applying for a lower position, so let's just say I'm currently a manager and I would like to apply for an assistant manager in a different company, but maybe job scope is the same, right? Do I need to downplay in my CV?
That's an interesting question,
Yeah.
actually, that I haven't really heard of. I
Yeah.
think based on what I know from talking to VPs, managers, directors, you should never downplay your experiences because your resume and your career profile is really your chance to show why you are the best out of everyone else. And it's a very competitive landscape. So honestly, I would say you should always overachieve, but show your most impressive accomplishments as long as they are relevant to that role. I think it'll help you a lot.
Yeah, and that's very true. And I think regardless of, your age, your work experience, number of companies you've worked in, or even the role, we need to acknowledge our own value. And really that builds a confidence in you as a candidate. So never ever downplay yourself, all right, guys? All
Yeah.
right, this question. If you have forgotten on some of the metrics achieved in your previous company, how do we word around those missing data and to present those metrics? So if you've forgotten about sales volume or how many partners you've worked with, how do you communicate that without numbers?
So in that case, I would probably focus the most on what kind of keywords are you trying to tailor towards? So for example, if the position is really sales centric, can you remember if you were able to secure a quarterly star award for making the most sales that quarter or for that annual target, something like that? So if you have any awards and accomplishments, those are other things that you can mention if you don't really remember the figures. A best practice though, whenever you are going into any role, is to keep a log of all the things that you've accomplished and try to quantify them. So I make the habit of updating my career profile and my resume probably every month or every few months because I really want to keep that fresh. And these are also things that you can highlight to your manager in your performance reviews because that will impress them and make you look better for your next performance review.
It's good. Now let's go to about resume template. Someone asked, is using a resume template bad?
I would actually say no, because resume templates are very helpful and a lot of them are ATS optimized. So if you come to our website on ResumeWriter.MY, the resume templates that you use actually are very helpful because they have the right formatting. You just got to plug and play with your more tailored experiences. So I would recommend that you use the templates because it's simple, it's easy to read, it'll go through our ATS scanners, and you don't really need to worry too much about other details.
That's good, thank you. Now, coming to customizing your resume. So we talked about, customizing your skills and talents and achievement according to the roles that you are going to apply for. Now, is this also applicable to executive summaries? Do we also have to customize it for every application?
I would say yes, because that is supposed to be a summary of the rest of your profile. So if you are applying for a sales manager role, you want your top 3 to 5 experiences to be related to sales and whether you were able to manage a team, exceed quota, and all that kind of stuff. So you do need to tailor everything from the beginning till the end.
Great. Now we've got quite a few of this next question. Is the profile photo important in a resume?
No, I would say take that profile out because that should not be on your resume. It can be on your JobStreet profile, but when it comes to your resume, it should come down to your experiences, your skills, and your competencies. What you look like should not matter for the candidacy process. It introduces bias.
But there is, I've been applying for jobs before as well, and some companies actually do request for photos. Do we then add it on or not? I don't know.
That is actually very interesting because over here in North America, you actually shouldn't ever include that. But if it is required and requested, of course, follow the processes that the HR department has, because if you don't, then you might get disqualified. But generally, if they don't ask for it, you don't need to provide a profile photo.
Okay, so do take note, guys. If you're applying for a job, just if you're not sure, you can always ask the recruiter, do you require a photo? And
Exactly.
yes, in what format? Because some would require passport photos, some is okay for you to have a casual photo. So it's okay to ask questions and check just to make sure that you get the right things. And that also shows that you are paying attention to details and you want to make sure you submit the best things. And that is also a good impression, all right? Now let's go to the next question. So this person asked two questions actually. Is executive summary allocated at the end or at the top of our resume?
It should be at the top of your resume. And as for example, if you were to write a report for the CEO, they would want to just read that first pager at the very beginning that encapsulates everything in the rest of the report. So the same logic applies for your resume. You want that to be at the very top of your profile or your resume because that is what they're going to quickly scan. And if those 3 to 5 bullet points capture the hiring manager's attention, they'll keep reading. But if you leave it at the very end, then there's really no point for an executive summary.
Right. And let's talk about resume templates for that matter. We've seen a lot of decorative, creative resumes, right? And their placements are generally different from a top-down format. Are those actually necessary? And will it actually give a better impression of who we are and how we design our resume?
So contrary to popular belief, no, you should not use a decorative resume because they're not ATS optimized. A lot of the times when you have a resume that looks super fancy or super complicated, it actually won't go through the ATS scanners that well because it misses out a lot of your keywords. The margins are going to cut off. So a lot of complications arise. So best practice, if you are using a resume template, just use one from our ResumeWriter.MY site that is ATS optimized, or you can even go onto your JobStreet profile and export it, your profile into a resume.
Yeah. That's great. So remember, guys, if you need to have any ATS approved resume templates, you can always go to ResumeWriter.MY and find out there. All right. Now, next question. We've got really a lot of questions, I'm trying to summarize it. So what is the difference between a CV, resume, and no, executive summary is already in it, right? So what's the difference between CV and resume? And if I already have a CV, is it the same thing as your executive summary in your resume?
So a lot of the times I would say they are interchangeable for the most part. A CV is sometimes a lot more in depth and it can go for like 3, 4, 5 pages, whereas a resume is really focused on your core experiences that are relevant to that job. How I like to think of it is a CV encapsulates all of your different experiences, even if they're from different backgrounds, but then a resume is more tailored. So as a current professional myself, if I applied for a marketing role, I would take some parts of my CV that are marketing related and put them onto my marketing resume. Whereas if I was applying for a finance role, I would only take what's finance related on my CV and put it on a finance resume. So hopefully that makes more sense. But academic wise, a lot of CVs, academically, they are always looking for CVs, which list all of your research papers and things like that.
Okay. That's good, because I think a lot of people always ask, if I have a resume, do I actually need to have a CV, or should I just submit my resume? And that's always the question. Yeah. So
okay. I do have a comment here. So like a lots of regions, resume and CV are in the same documents. So it really depends on which country you're in. So if for example, Asia and Europe, those are in the same documents sometimes.
Yeah, that's great. All right, let's move on to the next question. Now, what is your best advice in terms of about targeting your CV when you are switching industries? How does your different experiences in different industries fit into your resume?
I would say the most important thing is looking for those transferable skills. So even if you come from so for myself, I came from an oil and gas industry. So as you know, it's slower paced, more bureaucratic. But what I focused on when I was in oil and gas was training people on how to use SharePoint, how to do better at information management and collaboration. And that was something that I was able to bring into my role at Microsoft, which is very tech and fast paced and all about online collaboration and remote work. So I was able to just look for those transferable skills, make them relevant on my profile to appeal to that job description that I was applying for. So when it comes to looking at a job posting, take a look at what those keywords are and most of the time you can distill them down to some of the most important skills, such as communication, teamwork, presentation. Those are all really core competencies a lot of the time. And if you have something relevant to that in your previous roles, then it can help you a lot.
That's great. Now we're going to have some questions about fresh graduates. For fresh grads who have no work experience, how can they apply, the part where we talked about metrics? How do they sort of replace that or replicate that with their extracurricular activities and to highlight their achievements and skills?
So I would say it's actually very similar. If you've worked or managed a team of 5 as a VP of corporate relations in your student club, you can mention that. So for example, when I was in university, I managed a $200,000 budget for a 5-day event for 300 students across Canada. And that was something that I put on my resume and my profile, because that was quantifying my experiences and it made me stand out. So that is one thing you could do. Another thing is take a look at what are some of your key performance indicators in your role in your student groups. So for example, if you are a director of marketing in your students group or in your student club, and your job was to create infographics or market your different events, then you can talk about how you were able to create a social media campaign, and that led to 50 attendees for your event, which was a 10% year-over-year increase from the previous year. A lot of times it may be hard for you to keep track of all these metrics because other students may not do it, but that's why you should try to keep track of it for yourself and always try to measure beginning versus the end, so you can look at the before and after effects.
That's really good. Now, okay, I'll probably take just one last question because we're already, been here for an hour. How do we address experience gap years? What do you suggest to have a C-suite show draft the resume?
So when it comes to the experience, for the experience gap years, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you can usually talk about it in your interview or in your cover letter, because that's probably when they would bring it up. So you don't need to worry too much about it. At the end of the day, you just want to be honest and show when you've actually worked. And if you have done any volunteering or anything during those gap years, it could be helpful to add that in as well.
So it's actually okay to suddenly not have work experience in that few years when you list out your job experiences?
Yes. So if you are worried about having that job gap, just talk about it in your cover letter or talk about it in your interview. So it provides some context about why you took leave during that time, and frame it positively. Because, for example, if you left because you wanted to start your own entrepreneurial journey and you wanted to try a startup for a couple years, that's totally fine. It's something like where you're building your own professional development, and it's for upskilling, caring for your family. Those are all other things that you could frame positively for your employment gaps.
That is great. Now, actually, we have like a ton more questions, but unfortunately, we can't answer all of them. But anyway, we just want to thank you, Karen, so much for sharing with us your experience and your knowledge about, how to actually craft our profile, whether on JobStreet or on your resume in itself. It will help, using the right words, identifying the right thing, even putting the sentence in the right way. I think that's so important. Thank you for reminding us about it, and thank you for even teaching us if we are like fresh grads. Now, to all of you who does not have, if your questions are not answered, don't worry, you can always DM us on JobStreet, our Instagram or Facebook page, and we will try to answer all the questions at best as we can. We will try our best. There's a lot of questions. I think I have more than 30 questions in the Q&A box, and I've got a lot more in the chat box. We will try our best to answer all of them. So just pop by our Instagram and ask us. And if you have any other questions or information that you need, JobStreet as well, we actually have a whole section of career resources, teaching you how to, craft your resume, what are the transferable skills that you can highlight on, what kind of power words that you need, how to, get through interviews, even if you're not familiar with it. We've got a lot of content coming up, which is already even up on our website, actually. So just look up for it, JobStreet career resources. You can just easily Google that. We've got all of those content. So we are here to really support you guys. Karen and us, we work together is really to help you be ready for, what's ahead next for your career. So we hope this has helped you. We hope that you've learned something, got tons of notes, share it with us, tag us, share it with your friends, and yeah, let us know if you've got any more questions or even topics that you want to hear from us in our next webinar. So thank you so much, Karen. Thank you, everyone, for participating, being with us, staying through this 1 hour with us in this early morning. We hope that this will push you through towards having a great day. And yeah, thanks again for joining us. I think we have a survey at the end of this webinar. So if you can just, respond to the survey and let us know, and what do you think about this? And also, if you have any other suggestions, do let us know. We are going to have that survey, should be right up after we end this call. So again, thank you, everyone. Reach out to us if you need help or if you have any questions. We will help you the best we can. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yes,
Karen.
and please do provide feedback on how I did as a presenter. This was my first time presenting to such a big audience, so I would appreciate any feedback on how I can improve. So thanks for having me, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everyone.